to the entire Rocky DU team. I just wanted to tell you guys that, yes, I'm a professor at Hunter College, and so I teach undergraduates and graduate students and talk to faculty all the time, but what's near and dear to my heart is actually talking to middle school and high school students about our work, because I'm really interested in engaging all of you and helping you to figure out what you want to do with your careers and hopefully getting you more interested in wildlife conservation and the environment. So hopefully you'll enjoy this talk. There's lots of videos of elephants, some of it funny, some of it not so funny, but nothing sad, hopefully. But I hope I engage you in thinking more critically about what we can do to try and help species like elephants. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to kind of illustrate for all of you is, some of you might be wondering, how do you get into a field like this? How do you study elephants? But like many young people who are interested in trying to get involved with working with animals, I wanted to be a veterinarian. So I worked with every type of vet you guys can possibly imagine. Right? I worked with dogs and cats, I worked with cows, I worked with horses, I worked with wildlife. As an undergraduate student in college, I realized I didn't really like medicine. Right? So I worked with all these animals, but I wasn't really excited about the medicine side. And I learned really quickly that there was this really cool thing you could do, research, that also involved animals. And it didn't need to be invasive, right? We didn't need to dissect brains. What we could do is study their natural behavior. And as I continued to be a student, I started to get really interested, not in necessarily just observing behavior, but also thinking about how animals think. And so that led me to become a comparative psychologist. Right? Does anyone have any idea what that might mean, comparative psychology?
No.
Okay, so you don't know, but does anybody else know? Basically what we're trying to do is understand similarities and differences in how animals and humans think. Right? And so evolution shapes the way in which different individual animals and different species think. And some species are more intelligent than others, but what we're really interested in is trying to understand how animals evolve to do really well in the environment in which they live. Right, so I got into elephants by chance. Right, it wasn't that I was a little kid and I saw an elephant for the first time and I went, oh my gosh, I want to be an elephant researcher. I wish that's what happened, but it's not. As I said, I wanted to be a vet. Then I ended up working with a researcher in Atlanta at Emory University who was studying primates, chimpanzees. And one day he came to me about 6 months into my PhD program and he said, Josh, would you be interested in studying elephants? And I said, that sounds really cool. Let me think about that. And he proposed this project looking at whether elephants could recognize themselves in a mirror, which I'm going to show you in a few minutes. And that was focused at the Bronx Zoo in New York. And that got me so excited about elephants that I spent the next 15 years developing research field sites in Thailand to study elephant behavior and intelligence. So I'm going to talk to you guys about some of the work that we've done and how we're trying to apply it to conservation of monkeys and birds threatening the mirror, running around the mirror, attacking it, looking under it, trying to figure out, there's this strange animal I'm seeing, I don't like them, so how do I get at them? Right? And that's a normal social behavior when large social groups of animals come into contact with other animals they don't know. Right? But what typically happens is those animals never learn. Right? You guys might want to argue with me about this, but I promise you that none of your dogs and none of your cats recognize themselves in a mirror. Right? We can talk about this after if you want. When I give this talk, people always raise their hand and go, my dog recognizes himself, I'm sure. Doesn't mean that dogs can't use a mirror to find food, right? You might hold a piece of food in the mirror, the dog might look at the food, look at you, recognize, oh, there's my owner, and there's a treat, but who is that strange dog sitting next to my owner? And then they'll usually attack the mirror or look behind it. Right? So most animals never move beyond that stage of thinking it's another animal. But animals that do start to get it do very similar things to what we do. Right? So I've got pictures of chimpanzees picking their noses, their tongues out, looking inside their mouths, right? These are not social behaviors. These are behaviors that seem to say, that's me, and I'm going to use the mirror to look at myself, right? And this is a chimpanzee grooming themselves. And so we wanted to test this in elephants. And so we used a task that had been designed originally for chimps. It's pretty simple. First you observe these animals and you see the types of behavior they do. So elephants like to take their ears and inspect them in front of the mirror. They'll rub their tusks. They'll lift their trunks up in the air. But that's really subjective, meaning it's really kind of you as a scientist going, I think they get it. But the best way to do this objectively, to look at this and go, I think the elephant recognizes themselves, is the mark test. Right? And you can try this with young kids if you want, but basically you put a mark on their face, and there are a lot of different controls in these experiments to make sure that you're doing it right. We can talk about that later if you'd like. And then you put the elephant in front of the mirror and you see what they do. Right? So if you're an elephant, and I put an X on your face, and you recognize yourself, you would expect that the elephant would go, I have an X on my face, that's not normal, and reach up and rub the X on their face. If they thought it was another elephant in the mirror with an X on their face, what do you think they might do? Yeah, great. They might reach out and try and rub the X off on the mirror. Right, so this is one of my favorite videos. This video is more than 80 years old. It's one of the first experiments ever done with non-human primate psychology. And what this researcher, Crawford, was interested in studying was how do animals think about cooperation? Can they be flexible, right? Is it just programmed into their genes like it probably is with honeybees and ants and probably even some big cats like lions that cooperate in the savannah to get access to food? Or is this something that they can actually think about cooperation? And so what you're going to see here are two chimpanzees that are coordinating their pulling. Right? And this is a really heavy box that one chimpanzee cannot pull on his own. He needs his partner to help him. Right? But these chimps were trained to do this. They were trained to pull ropes, so that's not really that exciting. But look at the chimp on the right. The chimp on the right is really hungry. The chimp on the left is not that hungry. And so this, to us, says, and again, the reason you guys, and I wait for your reaction, because you guys are laughing because it's funny, it definitely is, but what's so exciting about this is it shows that this chimpanzee seems to understand that the only way to get access to food is to get the partner to help. Right? And so what the scientists did was they made one chimp hungry, one chimp not. The chimp that's not hungry isn't really motivated to participate, so the hungry chimp has to go over and recruit the partner. Right? There has to be some understanding here. There's this problem. I want food. The only way to get it is to cooperate with my friend. So we wanted to do this with elephants, which is not easy because you'd need to find a box that was too heavy for one elephant, but not too heavy for two. And I have video of elephants pulling huge commercial 747 aircrafts down runways.
This, folks, look at these little people pull. This is just incredible. They are determined, and it is going to be close. And I'll tell you what, it's very close. It's very close.
We don't have that in the jungles of Thailand. So we used this really genius design that came out of the lab, the Harada lab in Japan. And instead of having a really heavy box, it's just simply a pulley system. Right? So this is a table, and there's a single piece of rope that feeds through the table. So if you're an elephant and you pick up one end of the rope and you pull it, the other end of the rope becomes unthreaded from the table. Right? So the elephants have to learn to grab both ends at the same time to make the table come towards them. It has nothing to do with weight. And when you're a researcher that studies animals, the coolest thing is coming up with really weird ways to work with these animals. So this is a volleyball net. So many of you are probably thinking, like, this is a 10,000-pound animal. Can't they just walk up to the table and grab the food in these two buckets? They can, but for some reason the volleyball net was a really nice barrier. They didn't like the fact that it was kind of sticky. They don't like this nylon stickiness, and they couldn't put their trunks into it. Right? Their trunks might get stuck. So the elephants learned really quickly that this could be a cool barrier for them. And so basically, I don't want to go into too much detail about this experiment, but what we did was we had the elephants first learn how to pull ropes, and then we had them approach the ropes together so that they could learn, okay, when I pull with this other elephant, I'm going to get to eat. But if you really want to understand what they think or understand about cooperation, you have to change that up a little bit. And so what you do is you release one elephant before the other. Right? If all they know is when I see a rope, I pull a rope. Right? What you'd expect is that the elephant would get up there, pull the rope, it would become unthreaded, they'd never eat. But if they can learn very quickly that their partner needs to be helping them, then what you might expect is that the elephant is going to wait to pull until the partner arrives. And this is a 45-second period that the elephant waited. I just fast-forwarded it to the end so you guys can see what happens. All the different elephants that we tested, and we tested 12 elephants, they were all doing this really well. But one of the hallmarks of animal intelligence, right, because it's really difficult to define intelligence. Like, what does that mean? What makes an animal smart? What makes a human smart? Right? With humans, we do IQ tests, which a lot of scientists argue aren't very good. But that's a test that you can give to people because you can ask them questions, right? We're not able to ask animals questions directly. So what we do is we observe their behavior. Right? We teach them something, but do they come up with novel ways of solving problems? And that's exactly what happened here. So this is something that really surprised me and also excited me. So this is a 5-year-old female elephant, right? This is a bird's eye view, so there's a camera up in the air looking down. They look like mice, but these are, I promise you, big elephants. And this elephant is doing what the other elephant did, wait for her partner. But what you guys are going to notice is that when this elephant gets here and starts pulling, this elephant's trunk is kind of moving around, not holding the rope. That's because she figured out entirely on her own that she didn't need to pull at all. All she needed to do was put her foot on the rope, hold it, so that their partner could do all the work. And I don't know how she learned this, because every time we did this before this particular time that you're seeing, she pulled like every other elephant. Right? But all of a sudden, she seemed to have kind of like a eureka moment, like, whoa, wait a minute, that's kind of a pain to pull this rope. Let me just stand on it, I don't have to do anything, I can be lazy, and I can get access to the food. Right? And you guys are hearing I don't know if you guys have heard the word anthropomorphism before, but it's a word that scientists are very cautious about, because what it basically means is that you want to be very careful about describing animal behavior in terms of human behavior. Because we can't put ourselves in these animals' minds yet. We're not at that point in science to be able to do that. I'm giving you explanations to kind of help you better understand what we're studying, but I'm also very careful as a scientist to try to figure out, well, what actually is happening here. At the very least, we're seeing behavioral flexibility, which means this elephant can pull, but she can also come up with novel ways of solving this problem. And that, to us, says that this is a sign of intelligence. But I talked earlier at the beginning, I said that I was really interested in trying to figure out how to best test these animals by putting yourself in their shoes. Right? And so that means trying to figure out how elephants see, hear, and smell their world. Right? So one way we can tackle this is by doing experiments using what we call an object choice task. It's really simple. I show you guys 2 buckets. One has food, one does not. Right? And I can manipulate the amount of information I give you about which bucket has food and which does not. And I want to see if you can figure out which bucket has food and which does not. And I'll show you what I mean by that in a second. So the first study that we were interested in doing was looking at whether or not elephants could follow pointing cues. Right? So imagine I take those 2 buckets, I put them on the ground, they've got lids, right? So you guys don't know where the food is because I maybe did it behind the podium over here. I put it on the ground and I point at one bucket. Right? I think all of you are going to figure that out pretty fast. Right? Okay, he's telling me that's where the food is, so that's where I'm going to go. Dogs are really good at this. Human children are good at this. Goats are pretty good at this. Lizzie can tell you that horses are pretty good at this. But chimpanzees aren't good at this. Wolves are not good at this. You guys might see a pattern. The pattern is domestication. So one argument among scientists is that domesticated animals, animals that we as humans have artificially bred, or so we've used artificial selection to breed these animals, right? The precursor to a dog is some form of wolf species. Right? We put them into our homes and we bred them for traits that we liked. And that's why you have dogs that are very friendly with people. And we think that through that process, dogs have gotten really good at following human social cues. But elephants are unique in that elephants have never been domesticated. But in countries like Thailand and India, elephants have been working with people for thousands of years. Typically what's happened is people have gone into the wild, captured the elephants, brought them into captivity to work with them. Usually in agriculture and war, now more in tourism. So Lizzie mentioned that I have a nonprofit called Big Elephants, and part of the nonprofit's work is to get middle school kids, both in New York and in Asia, interested in research. So we designed a study with a group of middle school kids, which I'm going to go over with you right now. And this is the paper we published, and most of the authors on this paper are from the East Side Middle School on the Upper East Side. So this was a great opportunity for students to get directly involved in this work. Okay, so here's your buckets, right? One has food, one does not. And so we're going to do the pointing task with a young 3-year-old female elephant named and we use different cues, right? Sometimes we pointed, sometimes we used open hands. And none of the elephants we tested were good at this. Right? All of them chose at chance levels. Basically means they were choosing at random. They had no idea what that hander, and in Thailand the elephant handlers are called mahouts. These are the guys that work very closely with the elephants. Had no idea what the mahout was trying to tell the elephant. Right? And after I showed the mahouts the results, and I said, yeah, the elephants aren't getting this, the mahouts got really pissed off at me. Because they're the ones that had said to me when I designed this experiment, they were like, elephants follow pointing cues all the time. Of course they're going to get this. So I said, all right, let's talk about this for a second. And this is the fun part of being a scientist, is just thinking about why things don't work. things don't work most of the time, by the way. When you're doing research with animals, most of the time the experiments don't work. And they said to me, well, Josh, actually, like this happens, we do this all the time. And so when we have tourists, the tourist will ride on the elephant's back, and the tourist will ride the elephant into the river, and then the tourists get to bathe the elephants. But right before the elephants get into the river, tourists will typically take off their sandals or their flip-flops, drop them on the ground at the riverside, and then when the elephants come out, the mahout will point at the ground and say to the elephant, pick that up. And the elephant will reach down, pick up the flip-flops, and then hand them to the tourist on their back. And that got me thinking, what is the elephant actually doing there? Right? Is the elephant following your point? Or is the elephant with these really big ears that allow them to hear really well, putting their ears out, localizing your voice, right? You guys can do that just by putting your hands around your ears. You can tell that it's much easier to localize sound, right? The elephants, and their ears are huge. They're able to figure out where your voice is being projected. Then they put their trunk in that direction. We all know that human feet, the best smell. The elephant knows exactly what they're smelling for, and so they put their trunk in that direction. Right? So now that got me thinking, whoa, wait a minute. You think the point is what the elephant's following, but maybe they're following something completely different. Okay, so we said, well, maybe they follow sound. Okay, I think everybody knows where the food is. This is Pepsi again. Star subject. And none of the elephants got this better than chance. Right? And so, again, I think you have to try and think like an elephant. Right? And I'm sure that some of you might know this, but just for, because of time, I'll tell you. The reason the elephants probably weren't getting this is because elephant food doesn't make sound. Right? Like the bananas in the forest are not calling to the elephant, come eat me. Right? So these are sunflower seeds. And the elephants are used to finding their food in a different way. Not by listening for it, but we think by smelling for it. Elephants have an incredible sense of hearing, and we think that that is largely used for their social communication. So they're able to communicate both within the frequencies of sound that we can hear and also infrasonically, which is at a very low level of sound, low frequency that we cannot hear. And we think that that ability allows them to communicate in very dense forests and allows the sound to transfer through the ground. They have these really cool seismic detection pads on the bottom of their feet that allow them to detect sound that way. So, very cool. So then we said, okay, smell. Can elephants find food using smell? And the punchline is they can. So we did the same experiment. We gave them those 2 buckets. We drilled holes in the tops of the buckets. We let the elephants smell them, and immediately the elephants were really good at finding the food. So that said to us, now we can start to test elephant intelligence by trying to think or smell the way an elephant does. Right? So we started to design experiments that focused on that. And so this is the most endangered, most highly trafficked mammal on the planet right now. So this is used in traditional Eastern medicine, where the pangolins are caught, the scales are taken off the pangolin, and then they're ground into a medicine. The sad thing about the pangolin is that their defense mechanism, when they're presented with a threat, is to curl up into a ball. Which if you're a poacher and you're going into the wild to get these guys, it's really easy to do it. You come across a pangolin, you pick them up, you put them into a sack. Right? And so what's really scary is that we know nothing about this animal. No one had ever done behavior or cognition studies in the lab to try and better understand what these animals are doing. Because the thought is, if you can better understand what these animals need to survive in the wild, maybe you can come up with better ways to protect them. What's really interesting and scary is that poachers, the guys that go out and catch these animals, are really good at finding pangolins. Scientists are not good at it at all. So we need to come up with novel ways to try to protect them. And again, punchline is we find that the pangolins are also really good at using their noses, and they follow scent trails to get ants and termites. Right? No one had really known this before. I mean, people had ideas about it, and so our thought is, well, if they're really good at this, then instead of trying to find the pangolins, let's try to find the ants and the termites. Those are much easier to find, so if we can protect the ants and the termites, the pangolins will be attracted to that area, and then we can go and potentially protect the pangolins. I told you it's really fun to work with these animals, so I love to put GoPros on animals. I have GoPro footage of elephants having GoPros on their heads. It's not painful, it's just basically putting it on a sponge. But it's a great way if you really want to understand an animal's perspective. So this is a GoPro on a pangolin. This is Josh DePaula, who's one of the master's students in my lab. He went to Thailand, was working with a group of pangolins, and I just wanted to show you guys how easy it is to distinguish between the different senses that these animals could be using. This is a live ant nest. Most of the time this pangolin is fed with dead ants, just because it's easier to provide to him. These are red biting ants, and all of a sudden he's going to get presented with a live colony. So you guys can see the tongue, but you can also hear the bloodhound sniffing, right? So this tells us that if you want to better understand an animal like an elephant or a pangolin, you need to be able to put yourself in their heads, and you need to be able to be really good at understanding smell. Where elephants, both males and females, have big tusks, and poachers are killing the elephants to get access to those tusks. Ivory can be made into jewelry and other things that people are gifts that people are really interested in, primarily sold throughout Asia. But that's not the biggest problem in Asia. The biggest problem facing Asian elephants, and I should have said, sorry, I should give you guys this basic fact. There are two species of African elephants, the African savanna elephant, which lives in the savanna, and the African forest elephants, which lives in African forest, and then Asian elephants. And there's one species in Asia that lives across the entire continent. Asian elephants are not in as much trouble because of poaching as they are because of human-elephant conflict. Right, so imagine you guys walked out of your New York City apartment and there was an elephant eating in your garden. Right? That might not be that big a deal. It'd be maybe kind of cool, because I assume that most of you and your families are not making a living off of the small gardens you might have in your, if anyone has a garden in New York City. Right? In Asia, in countries like Thailand, in agriculture areas, this is all the farmers do. Right? This is how they make a living. They plant sugarcane, corn, cassava, pineapple. And what's happening is the elephant's habitat has shrunk so much that the elephants are leaving their natural habitat, raiding farmers' crops, and coming into conflict with people. Right? And the governments aren't necessarily helping as much as maybe they could or should. The farmers get very upset, and then you get conflict where the farmers are attacking the elephants attack the people, and so you have some problems. Right? And these are different strategies that people have used to try to combat this. Right? So if you're a farmer, you might be really frustrated, and what you're interested in doing is trying to physically keep the elephant out of your crop. Right? So what they do is they put up electric fences that are not meant to kill the elephants, but meant to shock them, to scare them away. They dig big trenches, right, so the elephants don't want to get into them because they can't get out. These are firecrackers. So we work with farmers in Thailand, and they use the firecrackers a lot. Basically, you just shoot them above the elephant's head, and the idea is that it'll scare them off. But the problem is that all of these strategies are based on fear. Right? It's all about trying to scare the elephants away from something that they want. I hope that you guys are thinking that that might be problematic, right, for a number of reasons. One being that it doesn't work if the animals have some desire or need to get access to this food. Right? Over time, the elephants might learn, yeah, you're scaring me, but I still want to get access to that food. Right? An example is with these firecrackers. Right? I have never seen something that the elephants were so quickly to adapt to. Right? So the farmers will get in their pickup trucks, they'll chase the elephants out of their crop fields, and the elephants will wait on the edge of the crop fields with their ears pinned back against their heads, basically so that the sound kind of just washes over. Right? So I told you guys before, if you put your ears out like this, you hear really well. If you pin your ears back against your head, you don't necessarily hear as well because the sound doesn't have that surface area to pass into your ears. So the elephants have adapted to this. Basically, they just say, all right, I'll wait on the edge of the field until you get tired of shooting these firecrackers, and then I'll go back in and I'll eat the food, which is exactly what's happening. So what we're trying to do as comparative psychologists is say, can we try to figure out why all of these strategies aren't doing so well? Right? So in India, for instance, what they really like to do is take elephants that are causing problems, like elephants that have knocked down electric fences or attacked people. They pick them up in pickup trucks, right, or big trucks, and they move them to another location. It's basically like, let me take this problem and move it somewhere else. What happens, if you understand anything about elephants, is that you just took one problem and you moved it to another area. Right? So if you guys don't know something and you see somebody perform something, so I'll give you an example, maybe not necessarily a good one. If you have a student who's not a very nice person, right, and they bully other students, right, and so the best thing you can do is take that person and move them to another school, right, but what you've potentially done there is you've just moved the problem. Right? You've taken that bully, moved them to another school, maybe they become friends with other students who then become bullies as well, and that's exactly what we think is happening with elephants. You've taken the problem from one place, moved it to another. Electric fences don't work really well because elephants are smart. I'm going to show you a video that we took of an elephant taking down an electric fence. I have this really funny video, which unfortunately I wasn't able to pull up for today, but I'll describe it to you. It's a group of elephants standing in front of an electric fence, right? And they're just being pretty quiet. And then one elephant backs up, gets behind a young elephant, and shoves the young elephant into the fence, right? Which deactivates the fence, and then all the other elephants step over and walk into the crop field. Right? So that is the reaction I was expecting, but I would say that that's not necessarily, I mean, it's mean, but it's also something these elephants have learned about over time, right? This is not a dangerous fence. The fence is not going to hurt them, it's just to shock them. And this elephant realized, okay, well, I don't want to get shocked, so I'm going to push someone else into it. Very anthropomorphic explanation, but a good example of how flexible these animals can really be. Right? And another problem is if you put up something like an electric fence, you're basically saying to the elephant, I don't want you to have this really high-quality, tasty food that's on the other side of it. Right? So if any of you have worked with young children, you know that if you tell a child, or when you guys were kids, you can't have this cookie, and then you take a cookie jar and you put it inside the kitchen on a shelf, right? What is that basically doing? It's daring you to go for the cookie. Right? You're not fulfilling the need or the desire of that child who really wants that treat or that candy. It's the same idea with the elephant. So what are we trying to do to come up with new ways to try to tackle this problem? And the short answer is we're trying to think like elephants. So this is our research site. This is Thailand, for those of you that haven't taken world geography. This is us over here. Right? So this is Southeast Asia. And we are working on the western border of Thailand. This borders Myanmar. And this is a wildlife sanctuary inside a province called Kanchanaburi. What's really cool about Thailand is that they've done a really great job of protecting their national parks. And they have tourism activities where people can come and visit the national parks. But the wildlife sanctuary is protected habitat that no member of the public is allowed into. So the only reason we were allowed in is we applied to the government to get a research permit. Okay, so really briefly, just to describe what we're doing. What's really scary about this problem is that people haven't been studying it that much, right? So we think there are approximately 3,500 wild elephants in Thailand left. We have no idea if that number is accurate. We think there are approximately 300 elephants in the wildlife sanctuary we're studying. We have no idea if that number is accurate. Right? So what we're trying to do, and this sounds like a big, tall order, is to first try to figure out how many elephants are there. Right? So we sit in watchtowers inside the protected area. We sit in watchtowers with the farmers along the crop fields. We set up camera traps, which are these really cool small cameras which you attach to trees. They can capture both photos and videos. I'm going to show you guys some great video that we've gotten. And you try to figure out how many elephants you're seeing. Right? It takes a really long time. If any of you ever want to come over to Hunter College, you can see my graduate students sitting in the lab trying to figure out what size ear is that, and is there a tear in that ear, and how big is that head? Right? So you're trying to, basically me sitting here and trying to ID each and every one of you individually. Right? Not easy. And what we're trying to figure out is why are some elephants taking real big risks and raiding crops? Because I said there are probably about 300 elephants in this area. Not all of them are leaving the sanctuary and raiding the crops. It's probably only 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 elephants, not probably much more than that, which means that some of these elephants we think have personalities that make them take these big risks. Right? So we want to try and figure out how do we define these differences in personality. Right? What makes an elephant a crop-raiding elephant? So we sit in watchtowers and we observe their behavior. We look at things like dominance. Are there some elephants that are more dominant? Are there some elephants that take big risks and are more playful or more aggressive? We do that both by observing them and by setting up experiments. Now, I hate to say this because it's a little bit of a downer, but if I was giving this talk maybe 1 week later, we would have our very first videos of wild elephants playing with these boxes. So this box is really simple. It's simple for us at least. Basically, you attach this to a tree. All these holes allow them to smell. We put jackfruit inside, a really smelly, wet, tasty fruit. This slides, so you slide the door, you can get access to the food. This, you pull the door open, you can get access to the food. This, you push the door closed, you can get access to the food. Right? These are 3 different ways to open the box. Seems pretty simple, but we believe, and we've tested this with elephants in zoos to see that it's true, some elephants are going to be really deliberate, right? They'll go up, like maybe some of you guys would go like, okay, maybe I'm going to use my hands or my trunks to figure it out, whereas other elephants, I'm guessing are just going to ram their heads into it, right? Just like some of your friends who might say, I'm just going to take this thing and smash it on the ground, versus some of you might be like, well, let's take a step back and try to figure out if we can open this less violently.
There we go.
Right? Those are differences in personality, and that might tell us a lot about what makes an elephant a crop-rating elephant. So here's just some videos I want to finish up with. This is a camera trap on a tree right at the edge of a crop field, right? So this is the protected area, the sanctuary. This is a sugarcane field, and this is an electric fence. Not a very good one set up by the farmers, and you're going to see how not good it is. So this is a bull elephant. I should say that elephant groups are typically made up of social groups, and if you saw right there, the elephant was shocked by the fence and so took a step back. Right, so he just snapped it with his foot pad, and he's going to walk straight into the field. Right, so that was useless for an elephant like this. And this is an elephant had no fear of an electric fence, said, I'm going to test this, okay, it's going to shock me, I'm going to use my foot, I'm going to take it down, and he walks right into the sugarcane field. Right, so what I was saying was that elephants live in very close-knit groups of kin, highly related, adult females and then young elephants. When male elephants reach sexual maturity, they leave the group, and they either go form bachelor herds or they go off on their own and live solitary lives. And typically what they're doing is going around looking for females to mate with. Right, so that's a video camera trap on a tree in a crop field, and this is video camera trap inside the protected area. Right, so these are large social groups of elephants. You guys are going to be able to relate to this if you have siblings. Be easy to see differences here, but when you watch elephants for a really long time, and certainly that last video of that one young female kicking her sister is a really good example of differences in personality. So we've got thousands and thousands of clips like that, and clips like this, and video from the watchtowers, and all of this video allows us to spend time IDing these elephants, to spend time looking at differences in elephant personality. And the punchline is what we're interested in trying to figure out is, can you identify in advance whether a certain personality trait will lead to an elephant being an elephant that might be dangerous, or an elephant that might crop raid? And if you can figure that out, potentially you can try to come up with strategies to prevent those elephants from coming into crop fields in the first place. It's really difficult to prevent 300 elephants from raiding crops. But if it's only a small group of elephants that are leading these crop raiding groups, it might be easier to come up with solutions. So we're at a really initial stage here, so we haven't really developed exactly how we're going to tackle this. We have ideas, I'd be happy to talk to you guys. But what I'm trying to demonstrate here is that understanding elephant behavior, understanding how elephants think, may have really strong implications for trying to protect them. So I will end with that. This is Pepsi, and that's Pepsi's Mahout's 3-year-old daughter, right? So really close relationship. I would not advise any of you to do that. So thank you to Rocky, and thank you to all of you for listening, and I will